want to talk about the scene from How I Met Your Mother when Barney goes on The Price is Right to meet Bob Barker. One of my favorite scenes from the show. All right, let's break it down. Okay, so, throughout the episode, Barney's talking about he wants to go on The Price is Right. At first, just kind of for girls and cars and money and stuff. But then he reveals that he believes that Bob Barker is his father and he wants to meet him because his mother once flippantly told him that Bob Barker was his father because she didn't know what else to say. And he supposedly believed this throughout his entire adult life up until this point, And the thing with Barney is he tells himself that Bob Barker is his father because he wants to believe it. Because I think to not have a father makes him feel incomplete. And thinking that Bob Barker is his dad makes him feel more whole. So he goes on The Price is Right, and he's spent all this time practicing, and he does really well. He has this one moment when he, basically gets Bob Barker to say that he's proud of him for doing so well in the show at that point. And it's kind of, and he has this moment where you close up on Barney, and Neil Patrick Harris does a really good job with the acting here, where he kind of gets a little teary-eyed, and it's funny because we know it's not really his father, but it's also a little bit genuinely sad too. And, he goes through the whole thing, and we see throughout the whole show, he's winning all this money, and he's winning all this stuff, and he doesn't care about any of that. He's happy to give basically all of it away to Marshall and Lily for gifts for their wedding, because it's all about just wanting to meet Bob Barker. He finally gets to the point at the end of the show, and the show is over, and he told them that he was going to tell Bob Barker that he was his father on live TV. And then once again, we get this moment where we get a close-up, a pretty extreme close-up on Barney's face. Some really good acting once again here from Neil Patrick Harris. And it's the point where he's supposed to tell Bob Barker that, he's his son. And if he had done that, it would have been this really awkward and humiliating experience. And he's really conflicted, and he's not sure what he wants to do it. And at the last minute, as, him and the gang are all watching it pre-recorded, he decides not to do it. And, they're like, well, why didn't you say it? Why didn't you tell him? Barney says, well, basically the whole thing where it's if you've lived your whole life thinking, something was a certain way, it would be hard to, know that's not true anymore. And that might have been really hard for Bob. Obviously, here he's talking about himself. And at first, when you're listening to it, it makes you think he's talking about himself, but that he says Bob, but of course, he's actually talking about himself. And basically what he's saying here, of course, is that he doesn't want to, he basically kind of wants to continue having this fantasy of Bob Barker being his father, even though on some level he knows it's not true. This is why he doesn't say it, but it's comforting to him to have this fantasy. And if he was to go and, I don't think he cares about potentially being humiliated on live TV. It's just a matter of if he were to get confirmed that Bob Barker wasn't his father, if he's like, hey, this is my mom, and he's like, I never met your mom, I never met this woman, that would be crushing for him. But he wants to keep having this fantasy because it gives him the comfort, makes him whole.